Jiangbi University, which was considered one of the most prestigious universities in the city. In one of the classrooms, there was a girl who attracted everyone's attention with her beauty. It turned out that her name was Lin Xiaoqiao when a strange guy approached her and brazenly leaned his foot on the desk. The lady, turning around, felt embarrassed, wanted to ask the young man who he was, and his classmates had difficulty understanding what the stranger was doing in their class, and the guy was dirty, and he gave off a feeling of nausea. After greeting her boldly, the young man announced that he was Lin Xiaoqiao's fiancé. Despite everything, the cheeky guy decided to kiss his new bride immediately after this statement. This greatly confused the girl, and she could not understand what was happening and why this stranger suddenly kissed her. This action caused Lin Xiaoqiao to tremble, and her entire body felt warm. Looking straight into the eyes of the young man, the girl decided to stop what was happening and asked who he really was. Deeply embarrassed, Lin pushed her fiancé away and demanded an explanation of his identity. Without a trace of embarrassment, the boy told his story, and he confirmed that he was indeed Lin Xiaoqiao's fiancé, and his name was Zhao Fan, and his teacher, who was also his uncle, had arranged an arranged marriage with the girl's father, and the teacher explained that the boy had already grown up and should look for a bride. Suddenly, the young man decided to demonstrate his superpowers and activated heavenly sight to examine his wife. It turned out that the girl's body contained a death aura, concentrated in the upper body area, and although it had not yet fully formed, Lanyon's spirit would be able to contain it, and the hero would be able to save the girl. Embittered, Lin Xiaoqiao claimed that Zhao was lying as she knew nothing about any marriage contract. The words of his uncle and grandfather flashed through the boy's mind, telling him that she was the only suitable bride for him, and that he had no other choice, and yet no one mentioned that she could not refuse, which could disappoint their relatives. In response to the indignation, Zhao Fan decided to remain calm and advised the girl to discuss this with her father. Suddenly, a group of hooligans burst into the office and accused the stranger of daring to kiss their goddess. The leader of the hooligans called the hero a damn dog and claimed that Lin Xiaoqiao was his girlfriend. The girl stopped her boyfriend and reminded him that her business was her own business, and she suggested that Wan Rinxin leave and stated that there was nothing between them, so she shouldn't speak so frivolously so as not to cause misunderstandings. Huang Rinxin simply laughed, claiming that they would be in a relationship sooner or later because he really wanted it. Watching what was happening, the guy realized that he couldn't just tolerate such clumsy behavior of Wan Rinxin. So the hero decided to resort to a trick with a pencil and a stationary knife. As the hooligans approached, Zhao Fan used a box cutter to try to force them to retreat, causing them to fall to the ground. Laughing, the guy said that the hooligans shouldn't worry because he was going to put on a show for them now. Watching Zhao closely fan him, one couldn't understand his intentions when he saw him sharpening a pencil. But it soon turned out that the young man was sharpening the pencil for a reason. He had his own plan. At this point, the hooligans felt a loss of control over their bodies and began to take off their outer clothing, understanding that is happening. Eventually, the villains began to ask Zhao Fan to stop this. The protagonist watched with pleasure what was happening and was glad that everything ended well, and although Lin Xiaoqiao was perplexed by the behavior of the hooligans. Students from other classes, filming the unusual situation in the classroom, gradually began to gather to capture the bullies taking off their outerwear. One of the men present in the office noticed a stranger who was clearly not an ordinary visitor to the educational institution. At this time, the main character finished sharpening his pencil with a stationary knife. The worried hooligans were surprised that it was finally over and they could relax. Now Huang Rinxin was very angry, realizing that every student in the school could have recorded him on camera. Zhao Fan warned the hooligans to stay away from his wife or he would make them regret it, but the girl was outraged, not understanding why this stranger called her his wife. Unable to withstand such a challenge, the hooligan began preparing to strike the stranger. Suddenly, someone intervened, warning Wan Rinxin that this should not be done. Irritated by this turn of events, the young man could not understand who dared to stop him. This man turned out to be the director, and Hooligan knew that the director and his mentor, the great Jiangbei and the emperor of the dungeon, and heard that even they came to him and bowed their heads, and therefore it was better not to argue with him, but rather to retreat. So the bully decided to turn to the young man, saying that he was lucky this time, but next time he would definitely get beaten up. When the boy looked at the director, he thought that this was the man he should address, because the man had a long nose like a beak, a skinny face, and pointed ears. Without hesitation, the man nodded his head, confirming that the young man was at the right address. The good-natured director greeted the hero, addressing him as the Great Master, and he wanted to ask if this was the same technique of leaf stripping that he had seen only once in his youth, when someone, waving his hand, dispersed a group of hooligans, as if playing the role of God. Snapping his fingers, Zhao Fan confirmed that it was his teacher, and that the principal was right, and it was a leaf-stripping technique that only elders knew and rarely used. For the man, meeting the Great Master was a real joy, because they were friends with the main character's mentor, and so the director asked the young man to help in one matter that he could not cope with. Watching this, the girl couldn't understand how the prestigious director of Jiangbei could address Zhao so respectfully. Fan Yu, and she wondered what connections these two people had. Coming closer, the man announced to the hero that he was ready to offer any reward and asked him to name a sum within 8 zeros, since the old man was ready to cover any expenses. The smart guy immediately answered the director that he knew the saying, and the early bird catches the worm, and he emphasized that money did not matter to him and expressed only one wish, and that was to enter Jiangbei University in the same class as his rivals in love. That is why wealth is like dirt to him, and money does not interest the guy, and his only desire is to be accepted into Jiangbei University, in the same class where his rivals in love are already. Listening to the conversation, Lin Xiao couldn't understand why this young man decided to enroll in her class and how it related to her. Meanwhile, the leader of Jiangbei agreed to these conditions and asked for an opportunity, and from tomorrow, Zhao Fan will be able to attend the university. Feeling furious, the girl began to walk away and shouted after them that she had been confused and that she could no longer tolerate such company, then left. Reaching out to his bag, the boy asked Xiao to wait for him. Catching up with the girl, the young man told the manager that when he had free time, they could discuss the problems. The manager was amazed. The guy, who is not interested in money, pays attention only to the girl, and this caused admiration in the director, and even his students noticed it. The hero, who is desperately in love with the girl, tried to catch up with her, while Huang Rinxing watched what was happening. The hooligans didn't like this situation, and they saw a redneck trying to court their future girlfriend. Sometime later, events took place in the Lin family mansion. The old men were discussing that there was a painting of an old city landscape nearby that took 981 days to complete, and on the back of the painting there was a seal with the blessings of the gods, and if it was hung in a house, the business would flourish in less than 6 months. Lin Xiao's father, Lin Longti, was a big businessman in the city and decided to buy the painting, paying a whopping $2 million for it. The artist who painted the picture immediately accepted the check to receive the money. The old man just thought that rich people were incredibly stupid. Suddenly, someone began to enter the room, and a silhouette of a person was visible through the crack in the door. It turned out to be Lin Xiao and the protagonist, who asked her to wait. The father of the family was glad that his daughter had returned home, but he did not understand who was standing next to her. Extending his hand, the young man introduced himself to the man and realized that he was his future father-in-law. The artist tried to push the guy away, not understanding how the beggar dared to touch his hand. Zhao Fan became angry at the injustice, because he knew that the old man was wrong, since his clothes were no better. The artist explained that he was hired by Mr. Lin Longti and had a high salary, and the family company was in a difficult situation, so he was here to help them, and there was no place for children here. The hero, looking at the painting, could not believe that it was worth $2 million because he heard the conversation and realized that this was unrealistic. The old man smiled ironically and exclaimed that such a work of art was simply incomprehensible to people like him, which did not justify its depravity, and the boy was ordered to leave. Zhao Fan picked up the painting and noticed that it was meaningless, devoid of appeal, and painted with a harsh, auralist brushstroke. Therefore, the main character decided to tear up and throw away the painting, realizing that it would only add to the trash. These actions literally confused the old man, and he thought that the young man was simply mocking him, but Lin Longtu asked him to calm down. Looking at the guy, the man realized that the young man was talking a lot of nonsense, so evidence was required, and although it was obvious that he had an unconventional approach, and the owner of the house did not know what to do, so first of all, it was worth listening to him. From the protagonist's perspective, it was all quite simple, and the artist had said earlier that the Lin family was in a difficult situation, and in order to help, he brought this painting, but even if it was useful, it would only solve a small part of the problem, because the main problem was in the house itself. Not understanding what was happening, the man immediately became interested in how the house was connected to financial problems. It turned out that before entering the house, the heroes noticed the layout of the villa, and it was originally designed according to feng shui and brought wealth, but there was one big flaw that was not visible from the outside. The guy kicked the wall to show what kind of flaw he was talking about. The wall was destroyed, and behind it was a strange statuette, which probably brought trouble to the family. This really surprised Lin Long too, because he didn't know about this before and couldn't understand how the statue could end up behind the wall. It turned out that this statuette was an outward-facing figure, and it brought misfortune, making money on it, since the evil spirit absorbed all their wealth, despite all the feng shui rules. Not knowing what to answer, the owner of the house simply continued to listen to the young man and drew conclusions. Suddenly, the bodyguard came and told the boss that he was being called on the phone. The man also decided to pass on the information he received over the phone to his boss. Grateful Lin Long Tu exclaimed, "Thanks to the mister, things went well, and a large company agreed to their project, and the profit from it will be about $1 billion, and he clarified that he had previously proposed cooperation to this company about half a year ago." Throwing up his hands, the guy simply said that he had done only a small part of the work, and that all the credit should be given to the statuette. Lin Long Tu couldn't understand how all this happened, given the strict control over the construction of the house and the checking of every detail. The clever guy knew that Baiqing was a feng shui agent of destruction created only by certain carpenters who had studied Luban's book, and perhaps the owner of the house had somehow offended one of these carpenters during the construction process. Remembering that in the past, the carpenter and his comrade, the bodyguard, had gotten into a fight while renovating the mansion, even to the point where one of them was hospitalized for several days due to injuries, the bodyguard came to the conclusion that the carpenter might have had something to do with what happened. The solution was simple, and it was necessary to find that very carpenter, apologize to him, ask him to make a deity of luck and bring it home so that its direction would bring happiness and prosperity. But first of all, it was necessary to deal with a deceitful artist who brazenly tried to deceive Lin Long Tu. Feeling very guilty, the old man apologized to the master, admitting that Lu Wanfu was indeed wrong and had no evil intentions, and now he realized his mistake, asked for forgiveness, and was willing to pay a reward to Zhao Fan, hoping for his favor. This statement confused the hero, and he could not understand how such money could be sufficient. The old man's tears cut short his apology as he revealed that he had an antique shop on Jingjia Street and would pass it on to the protagonist and would also follow him to learn from him. Realizing that this was a more honest offer, the protagonist asked the old man to leave, but not to hide, since they still had to talk. The happy artist said goodbye to the master and was grateful for the absence of punishment. Lin Long Tu was sincerely grateful to the protagonist, realizing that without his help, his family could have suffered losses for many years. The boy also expressed gratitude to the owner of the house for raising such a wonderful son as Lin Xiao. Remembering the beginning of their conversation, the man decided to clarify whether the young man had any proof of his paternity. Taking a piece of paper out of his pocket, the guy exclaimed that he had evidence. This evidence was a photograph of Lin Long Tu's wife, which he took out of his pocket. This turn of events made the man start crying. He couldn't believe his eyes. Now, he completely believed Zhao Fan and began to ask him about the condition of Li Tianshi's father, and the guy replied that his father was fine, as was his grandfather. The embarrassed girl decided to ask her father why he was talking to a stranger. Suddenly, Lin Xiao began to experience severe pain and gradually lost consciousness. Her father immediately rushed to her aid, not understanding what was happening. The girl fell to the floor and lost consciousness, while the boy realized that the deadly aura had started to act much faster than expected, and it seemed that the person who had cursed her could not wait any longer. The events continued in the best hospital in Jiangbei City. The worried father decided to ask Zhao Fan what had happened to his daughter. Soon the doctor came out, and the frightened father turned to him to find out about the girl's condition. The doctor announced that they had done everything they could, but the girl's condition was deteriorating, and soon her heartbeat would stop and strange black lines would spread all over her body, and she would possibly die in less than half an hour. Lin Long Tu was very worried and ordered the hospital's best doctor to be called to save his daughter. However, the doctor explained that he could not help despite his father's influence, and Lin must find another doctor to begin treatment. The main character immediately went to the ward to save his beloved. The doctor warned him not to enter the intensive care unit without permission. The guy explained that his wife was there and he needed to save her. Understanding the desperation, the doctor agreed, ready to take on the responsibility. The father and the future groom entered the room to understand what had happened to the girl. Strange black lines appeared on the girl's body, not resembling a normal disease. In alarm, the man asked his daughter to hold on and fight for her life. With his head down, the top doctor admitted that only divine intervention could help the girl, and he was not ready to accept it. Reaching into his pocket, the protagonist exclaimed that there really are powers above us in this world. Taking out a huge magic scroll, the boy declared that today he himself would become this deity. When a magic scroll was ready for use, the young man took out the magic needles. These needles were inserted directly into the girl's head to perform a ritual known as the Phantom Gate of the Nine Needles. Watching this, the doctor was amazed. This was an ancient technique that he had only heard of, and a ghost gate that cleared the channels of life and death, and this skill had been lost for many centuries. Confident, the young man declared that this was indeed that ancient technique, and he was going to use it now. Thanks to this effective method, the man saw how the black lines on his daughter's face began to disappear. A qualified doctor examined the patient, starting with measuring her blood pressure. Fortunately, the pulse stabilized and the heart rhythm became normal, which meant the girl was saved. Shedding a courageous tear, Lin Long expressed his gratitude to Zhao Fan for the help he had given their family this time. Realizing that he could no longer contain his emotions, the man hugged the young man, realizing that without this stranger, his daughter would already be dead. Kneeling down, the doctor, who considered himself the best in the hospital, saw that the boy was a true master of his craft and began to beg the divine doctor to accept him as a student. The hero had no intention of teaching anyone and declared that he had no time to deal with old people, and it was on his shoulders to remove 9 needles in an hour and watch over the life of his beloved wife. After all, right now the main character had things to do that seemed more important to him than teaching the elderly. Feeling very awkward, the doctor began to cry, regretting that the divine doctor was leaving. Sometime later, events unfolded in Lin Xiaoxiao's room. Looking into the room, the hero felt joy, realizing that now he would be in the room with his beloved. After coming to his senses, the young man began to think about his purpose in being here and saving his wife, and he realized that he had to remain calm. Ling Xiaoxiao was struck by a blood curse that was sucking away her life force, and this cursed effect was extremely unpleasant, but it violated the laws of the heavens, so the sucking out of life force was weak. Casting such a curse requires an object that is constantly near the wearer to draw life force from them, and therefore such an object must be ordinary and inconspicuous among other things. By choosing one of the underwear items, the guy sought to avoid misunderstanding, since his goal was sincere and to save his bride. Zhao Fan looked through the contents of the cabinet, trying to find the very item that had been subjected to the spell. It turned out that it was an ordinary dress, at first glance unremarkable. A lock of hair used in a witchcraft spell was tangled up in the dress. Zhao Fan looked to the side and exclaimed that the sorcerer had been discovered, and he could now see him clearly. This was indeed so, because the mysterious sorcerer was watching the events through his mirror. This made the old sorcerer nervous, as he realized that the young man had found him. Declaring firmly that the sorcerer must be prepared for the consequences, Zhao Fan warned that his meeting with him was not far off. Several hours later, events continued to unfold as evening began to fall. Outraged, the young man walked down the street, thinking about how he could punish the evil magician. Suddenly, a multitude of magical needles began to fly away from nearby, directed towards him. Luckily for him, the quick-witted boy easily caught the needles, realizing that he was under attack. He then instantly threw away the needles, declaring that such useless tricks would not work against him. Thus, the magician was discovered, and Zhao Fan ordered him to stop hiding, as it was pointless. The elderly man was amazed that the boy, at such a young age, was already so developed. However, Sorcerer Bavazer believed that the protagonist was not his level match. Jokingly responding to this statement, the boy offered the sorcerer 2 options. The first was to remove the curse from Ling Xiaoxiao and leave Jiangbei. The second was to die. The sorcerer decided to choose a completely different option than the one the protagonist offered him, namely the option associated with Zhao's death. Fanya. Not far from the sorcerer, the body of his master, which he had used to create a powerful magical weapon, was floating, and he strangled him alive, took his head, purified it, and created the silver skull, which took 3 whole years to create. The sorcerer wanted Zhao Fan to experience the power of the magical silver skull for himself. For a guy, this skull seemed a little strange, but he was still able to demonstrate some skills, and Zhao Fan thought that he could show off a real magic weapon. Using his magical abilities, the young man began to use a brush that could destroy evil spirits. In his cultivation practice, Zhao Fan would take a 3-inch long piece of hair every year, wrap it around a 1,000-year-old rosewood tree, and then release it, worshipping the 4 beast gods, and only then could he create a weapon capable of killing evil spirits. Enraged, the scoundrel looked forward to the battle and declared that more action and less talk was needed. Using a magical weapon, Zhao Fan called out to the 4 noble gods of heaven and summoned the god of the east, the blue dragon. Using the brush of evil spirits, an attack was launched directly at the enemy. 2 magical forces collided and counteracted each other. The dark aura began to fight with the light one. The result of the battle was an explosion of incredible proportions, which made it impossible to determine the outcome of the battle. Looking at what had happened, the sorcerer was extremely irritated, realizing that he had not been able to achieve victory with just 1 blow. Suddenly, Bavasar fell down and admitted that the protagonist had indeed been able to win. Coming closer, the youth explained that his enemy could still be saved if he lifted the curse on Ling Xiao. Feeling great fear, Bavasar exclaimed that he no longer had the strength to resist and was going to lift the curse. At that very moment, the villain decided to use magic on his hand and, with its help, grew huge claws. The enemy decided to use a surprise attack to respond to the youth's aggression, as he thought that the sorcerer was already too weak to fight any further. Bavasar understood that, despite the fact that the enemy was stronger than him, he had more combat experience. The protagonist could not stand this and shouted that his enemy was stubborn, since he missed his last chance to save his life. Hearing this, the sorcerer only apologized, assuring that only the young man would die in this fight, because now Bavasar had an advantage that he wanted to use in the fight. Having summoned a huge number of magical skulls, the villain decided to do everything possible to defeat Zhao Fan. Watching his enemy, the young man saw how after he made a treacherous blow, his magical energy increased greatly. And this actually happened because the enemy, with his abilities, could summon even more skulls to attack. For the guy, this attack didn't seem strong enough, and he easily repelled it, after which he decided to ask his enemy if he was really ready to fight to the end. As it turned out, the skulls were not only behind the protagonist, but were also close enough to explode and cause serious damage. The smart guy still managed to jump away from the explosion site, and he realized that he could now fight the villain on equal terms. Seeing this, the sorcerer only laughed, knowing that even if the boy tried to run away anywhere, his silver skulls would haunt him until his death. Zhao Fan couldn't believe it, but he still decided to ask his enemy if it was true. The brave warrior continued to fight and, as he struck, said that he was very sorry, but it was too early for him to die. The criminal did not expect that he would now be attacked again. With a smile on his face, the young man realized that he could now truly win. Thus, the blow was delivered directly to the sorcerer, forcing him to freeze in place and await the consequences of such a serious magical technique. Turning to his opponent, the hero exclaimed that it seemed his skulls had returned to him again. And this was indeed so, because the enemy continued to stand silently, no longer able to fight. Having taken the blow upon himself, the impudent fellow fell to the ground, his body completely damaged, and the fight was over. With his last strength, the enemy decided to ask who this guy was. He was interested in whose hand he fell. Turning to the scoundrel, the young man exclaimed that he would never tell him, because he was not worthy of it. A few minutes later, the hero decided to enter the sorcerer's house to see where he was hiding. Supposedly, he cast a blood curse in his house. Strangely, it wasn't for Ling Xiao. As Zhao Fan walked further into the house, he began to realize that it seemed like the sorcerer had cast a curse on someone else. There was a girl lying on a bed nearby. Perhaps she had been there for a long time. Her spirit should have left her body within the first month, but it was forced to remain in the world of the living. As the young man looked around the room, he discovered a portrait of the sorcerer and that girl, and thus he realized that they were father and daughter, and in that case, it was no wonder that the sorcerer fought so desperately, because he wanted to forcibly revive the daughter's life by taking away the life energy from Ling Xiao. But this was against the laws of heaven, so it would be very difficult to do. While touching the magical items, the protagonist apologized to the girl, realizing that her time should have already expired, and now he was going to take what belonged to Ling Xiao. The life energy that once filled the girl's body had completely disappeared, turning her into something like a mummy. Zhao Fan breathed a sigh of relief, but there was still some strange feeling that prevented him from finding peace. Some time later, events continued in a field outside the city. the guy still decided to bury the bodies of the deceased, apologizing to them for not knowing their names. However, they would not be alone on their journey to the afterlife, as they were buried nearby, meaning they would go to heaven or hell together. Several hours later, Zhao Fan finally returned to the hospital to visit Lin Xiaoqiao. Raising his hand up, the young man began to use a magical technique to summon the sacred artifact. The sacred artifact was set on fire for further use. Thanks to the artifact, it was possible to restore Lin Xiaoqiao's powers, and the hero began to act, bringing the artifact closer to the girl's face. Thus, the life energy was successfully returned, and the lady could continue to live peacefully. Watching this unusual procedure, the man was impressed by his son-in-law's skills and did not expect that he was capable of such things. The sacred ritual was successfully performed, and the young man waved his feather, which signified the end of the return of life energy. The ritual really worked, because immediately after its completion, Lin Xiaoqiao was able to open her eyes, and she felt better with each passing second. The caring father immediately began to cry out of happiness, not believing that his daughter was now truly completely fine. It was a pleasant sight to see, and the young man really did everything he could to save his beloved. After some time, the events continued in the home of the Lin Xiaoqiao family. The young man brought a bag with him and rummaged through it to find certain ingredients for the dish he was going to prepare. The first ingredient for preparing the dish was ginseng root, which was supposed to have a beneficial effect on the immune system of the future wife. The next ingredient for the dish was the large varnish polypore, which could add spiritual strength to whoever ate it. All ingredients were placed in an alchemical cauldron and then carefully covered with a lid so that each element could be boiled. Watching her future husband cook, Lin Xiaoqiao was shocked, not understanding how she could not know about the existence of a multi-cooker. The cooking ritual began again, and the young man cried out, calling upon the spirits of heaven and earth to help him avoid making mistakes during the ritual. Suddenly, the multi-cooker made a sound, indicating that the dish was already cooked. An unrivaled vitality pill was prepared, and taking one such pill for a week not only restored lost energy, but also strengthened the spirit and physical condition, after which it would be difficult to get sick. The girl couldn't believe it and decided to try this unusual dish herself to see if it was really that delicious. What happened next really surprised her because the pill just melted in her mouth, leaving a very pleasant feeling. Seeing his beloved's reaction, the young man was very pleased that she liked the dish, but still decided to ask if it was really tasty. This question made Lin Xiaoqiao very angry, and she almost wanted to hit her future fiancé, asking him not to be such a slob. However, the lady also understood that she needed to thank her savior. Hugging him close, the girl thanked Zhao Fan, admitting that he really did save her life. Some time later, the events continued at Jiangbei University. The awkward young man laughed and blushed deeply, as if something was really bothering him. As it turned out, the guy was embarrassed only because the girl took his hand, and Lin Xiaoqiao felt very stupid because everyone was looking at them, and she was almost dying of shame. The girls from her other classes were very surprised that some country bumpkin could be next to Lin Xiaoqiao, but they understood that this guy was approved by the principal himself, and this young man was able to conquer such a goddess on his own. Even the director himself was shocked, but was glad to see the young man because he needed help, which he had been waiting for quite a long time. A little embarrassed, Lin Xiaoqiao greeted the director, and the protagonist exclaimed that a gentleman should keep his word, which is why he was going to go with the director to tell him what exactly he needed help with. After all, Zhao Fan wasn't here to study and asked his lover to let him copy her homework after school. A few minutes later, the director was telling Mr. Zhao Fan that this mansion belonged to his good friend, General Tang Ishin, and he is already old, but his health is fine, which is why the hero was warned that this man can sometimes be very strict. Recently, Director Jiangbei felt that he was clearly starting to go crazy, and his health was no longer as good as before, so Zhao Fan was asked to examine the general. Pointing his finger at one of the parts of the structure, the director exclaimed that this place was indeed very strange. It was a set of women's clothes. It seemed like nothing special, but the general had been living alone for a long time, and the director had asked him about it before, but he did not answer, perhaps because of his unstable mind. Looking at the balcony, the young man wondered whether this place was a haven for demons or a holy place, but it was not easy to determine. They decided to go to the general so that the hero could examine him, and the headmaster Jiangbei was proud of his smart student, not missing the opportunity to praise him in front of the general. The smart guy decided to immediately use his abilities to understand his interlocutor's problem. When he touched the general's hand, he felt a distinct loss of strength and energy, which led him to believe that there was a ghost in the house. Looking around the man's house, Zhao Fan immediately noticed his passion for drawing and calligraphy and asked him to look at them. The elderly man agreed without any problems and invited the guests to go into other rooms. The hero did not waste time and continued to use his super abilities, examining every corner of the building. While he was looking at one of the paintings, he had a strange feeling. This painting depicted the ancient spirit of the artist Luo Wuxin, and according to legend, this spirit inhabits works of art that are particularly reminiscent of living beings and is known throughout the world as the picture fairy. The picture fairy can easily capture the soul of a living person, drawing them into her world and then taking their body, and apparently the general had less than a year left before the spirit would take over his body and replace him. Turning to the director, the young man asked him to hold the general in order to perform one magic trick. The alarmed man immediately ran to his painting, seeing that something was wrong with it, but director Jiang Bei tried to stop him. Zhao Fan continued to watch the scene carefully and thought that, ultimately, both humans and demons were subjected to the same trials. In the end, each time you have to use your supernatural powers to drive out evil spirits. Using his supernatural powers on the painting, the young man sprinkled it with a magical red elixir that was supposed to summon the demon. This actually happened because the evil spirit began to emit piercing screams, experiencing severe pain. Without hesitation, the protagonist touched the forehead of the painting and commanded the evil spirit to disappear immediately. Continuing to use his magical abilities, Zhao Fan began to summon ghosts and demons to drive them out of the painting and then out of the building. Thanks to his skill, the young man easily managed to drive the demon out of the painting, and it materialized in the form of a girl who collapsed to the floor. Lao Tang immediately shouted for his Suyu not to touch her and not to come near her. The worried general couldn't understand what Zhao Fan wanted to achieve and why he was hurting this girl. Feeling very irritated towards ghosts, the young man declared that this was not true. He knew that this ghost was too weak, and there was another one in this room. After thinking for a while, Zhao Fan decided to threaten the demon with his magical power and asked where the second evil spirit was. Having started to cry, the evil spirit persistently refused to say where his partner was. Realizing that things were getting even more complicated, the boy resorted to using his magical artifact to threaten the demon and force him to tell the truth. Clutching the brush that was a magical artifact in one hand and using the mana in the other hand to draw a magical diagram, the hero set to work. Thanks to the magical artifact, it was possible to use the young man's abilities and knowledge to find out where the second demon was. A few minutes later, magical symbols for the ritual were drawn on the floor of the room. Having gathered all his strength to perform the ritual, the young man began to act, crossing his arms. A magical flame began to burst out of the protagonist's mouth, which was supposed to help him track down the source of power. This unusual flame immediately began to be absorbed by the seals drawn on the floor. Thus, thanks to his magical abilities and knowledge, it was possible not only to apply the ancient ritual, but also to find out where the demon was. Turning around, Zhao Fan exclaimed that he had found the very demon that had been hiding so carefully. And this turned out to be true, since the demon was hiding in the clothes that were on the balcony. Gradually, the spirit began to take the form of a female figure, even resembling a real person. This spirit must undergo 3 transformations, and it is important that no one interferes with this. Also, this found spirit emitted an incredibly strange aroma, which was completely unlike anything else. This spirit was a soul eater, a higher ghost, and one day a young woman was captured by the ghost, who sought out a victim, mutilated her innocent body, and drove out her soul. He then placed her body in a bath of incense to keep it fresh, and it lay there for 80 or 90 days before she turned into a soul-consuming demon. Her flesh, bones, and soul emitted a scent that deceived people. The soul absorber undergoes a transformation once every 10 years, twice after a century, and 3 times after a millennium. With each transformation, its scent becoming more intense and its power increasing. Feeling uneasy, the young man remembered that Fong Kai had told him about 3 transformations, which meant that this demon had already existed for 1,000 years. However, the hero understood that even such a powerful demon could be defeated. The spirit devourer was furious with people and sought to destroy everyone in the room, as they interfered with its transformation. The general did not understand what was happening in his house, as he was fascinated by evil spirits who sought to harm his health. Using the man as a shield, Zhao Fan stood behind him and asked the general not to let him go, as he had to withstand the attack of the evil spirit. The hand of the evil spirit was almost on target, and in a few seconds it was supposed to attack the general to take his soul. The evil spirit's malice was obvious, and the seemingly ordinary girl looked like she had incredibly evil eyes. This was a huge stress for the general himself, and he begged the great master not to continue any longer. It turned out that this was only part of the plan, as the hero understood that for the third transformation, the soul devourer needed a fresh, pulsating heart of a person born in the year, month, day, and time of happiness. And here she was plotting a trick, ordering the Go Su Yu to seduce Mr. Tang. In fact, the evil spirit only sought the heart with 4 lucky yaw. The girl began to transform again, and could not understand how the young man found out everything. The self-confident hero saw how the evil spirit became afraid when he spoke with such zeal, and the demon learned what true despair was. Zhao Fan not only possessed art and skill, but also a magical artifact that could destroy any demon. The devourer flared up in anger again and shouted that he would turn everyone here into dust. The demon began to attack, choosing his first target, and the strongest one, to destroy it. The attack was followed by a massive explosion, and it was unclear whether the boy survived. Luckily, the clever guy managed to survive and dodge the incredibly devastating attack of the evil spirit. Seeing this, the spirit devourer was about to attack again to destroy its target. The attack was really strong, and the protagonist understood that it would be difficult for him to resist for long. Soon the magical abilities began to gradually suppress the young man, and the spirit gradually fettered his hands so that he could not move. However, Zhao Fan began to feel embarrassed by this reception, as he felt an inexplicable sense of excitement, realizing that the evil spirit really did have an attractive taste. The lady, in whom the evil spirit lives, ordered her enemy to shut up, considering him a little devil. However, the young man gave it on purpose to test how strong the evil demon was. After using his magical artifact, Zhao Fan began to wait for it to take effect, doing his best to destroy the strongest enemy in the room. Since the boy's hands were tied, he grabbed the magical artifact with his teeth. Using his teeth, the guy managed to use the feather-shaped artifact and create an unusual magical wall that could even attack. The magical wall easily defeated the demon who so brazenly attacked the defenseless youth. The self-confident guy was glad that he was able to defeat such a powerful opponent with just his mouth and agility. Trembling with pain, the demon hated his rival and wished him death. It turned out that the demonic creature possessed not only magic, but also physical weapons, which he decided to summon. The physical weapons in the demon's hands were 2 sharp blades, with which he was going to attack. For the guy, this was a surprising turn of events, since he did not expect his opponent to fight with knives, since such weapons are not typical for women. However, the evil spirit was ready for battle, and grabbing both blades, the battle began. The first sword with red silk flew past, and Zhao Fan was amazed at how beautiful it looked. Red silk was tied to the blade to allow it to be controlled from afar. By pulling the red silk, the sword could be made to move in the opposite direction, which greatly surprised the young man. At first, he was interested in observing the trajectory of the daggers before moving on to close combat, because the most important thing now was not to feel fear. The enemy was stronger than it seemed, and Zhao Fan watched his battle actions closely. Thanks to his agility, the young man easily dodged several thrown blades. The flexible and powerful guy did not hesitate to kneel down to dodge the lady's attack. This fighting style was unusual even for a demon who was facing such an unpredictable opponent for the first time. Overcoming his strong resentment towards the spirit, the young man continued his advance, not intending to give up so easily. Unfortunately, his attack missed, as the creature easily dodged the clumsy blow. A counterattack immediately followed, and the protagonist received a blow directly to the head with a deft movement of the leg. After a strong blow, the guy had to rest a little, but it was clear that the enemy would not give him the opportunity to rest. The furious demon continued his offensive assault, using magical weapons directly from his hands and pointing them straight at the protagonist. The frightened guy did not immediately understand how to act in this situation, because he found himself in a trap that he himself had fallen into. The feather possessed supernatural power, and with its help it was possible to repel even the attack of such sharp blades that the opponent wielded. Concentrating his magical energy, the demon began to use his hand to launch multiple attacks directly at the protagonist. The creature began to spin at incredible speed, giving no opportunity to dodge such serious blows that followed one after another. Realizing that this ghost was more brutal than expected, Zhao Fan gradually began to retreat as such attacks were truly unblockable. However, the young master did not study magic in vain and skillfully began to use it to improve his visual analysis. With the help of supernatural vision, it was possible to see your opponent even when he was moving at incredible speed. Zhao Fan was able to easily catch his opponent thanks to his skills, as he was able to see him during the attack. The demon didn't expect this and couldn't understand how an ordinary person could see such fast attacks. The guy didn't lose his composure and took advantage of the chance to attack the impudent creature. Realizing that the man was still weak, the demon made every effort to win this fight and used any trick that could give him an advantage. It turned out that during the counterattack, Zhao Fan accidentally tore off the girl's clothes. Rising from the floor, the young man wondered what had happened, discovering that he had the demon's clothes in his hands. The embarrassed girl sat on the floor and exclaimed that her opponent really was a bully. When the demon weakened, the protagonist began to use a magic seal to prevent further harmful effects of the evil spirit. The creature was shocked that it was defeated by some boy, despite the fact that it had lived for over 1,000 years. This is not just some kid, but a supreme heavenly master who contains the light of all of China for 5,000 years, which should make any demon tremble. Suddenly, the young man had a strange feeling, and he began to gradually become fascinated by the incredible aroma emanating from the girl. The hero realized that this was a demon spell, which he should not succumb to, because he was the supreme heavenly master, and he should not be tempted by such beauty. Casually, the demon continued his attack and stated that it was time to end this battle, and the protagonist was also ready to continue the fight and understood that the battle had to be finished. Using the magical light from his brush, Zhao Fan drew a diagram that would help defeat the evil spirit. Realizing that the rival was really strong, the evil spirit began to threaten that if the princess was freed, he would in no way spare a person like him. To the boy, this evil spirit was just an ordinary villain who pretended to be a princess to gain sympathy. But the girl did not like this, and she shouted that she should be treated with respect because she was the 17th princess of the Xiaxia kingdom. Hearing this, the young man decided to think twice before killing the evil demon. Using his artifact, the hero thought that he did not feel any signs of death on her body, and perhaps the princess was really alive. Confused, the girl began to tell that she was killed, but existed as a ghost for a long time, and only during the second death, 900 years ago, the heart of the dying was taken to continue her life, and she suffered a lot, but now no one can even pity her. After listening to the princess, Zhao Fan began to doubt her words and asked her to explain the situation with the general and the spirit from the painting named Sui Yu. It turned out that when the evil spirit noticed Tenigiona, Sui Yu was already here, but Little Yu didn't want the general to stay in the house alone. And even knowing that the demon wanted to take his heart, she begged for his soul to be sealed in the painting along with her. With a heavy sigh, the former princess admitted that Little Yu was very affectionate and sweet, and so she decided to accept her as her servant, and they truly loved each other along with the general. And Tang's soul Igiona leaves not because of the two of them, but of his own free will. After listening to the spirit, the hero realized that their existences were not marked by death, which implied that both spirits were quite good. However, the young man still wanted to communicate with the demon, and he had always wanted to meet such a girl, and it was rare to meet a ghost that did not look old, and moreover, he could find her another heart to complete all three transformations. It was shocking for the ghost, and she didn't think that she could become a personal maid on call, and after all, she had been a chastity for 1,000 years, which she considered more important than even survival. Zhao Fan still decided to explain that he didn't need the ghost to warm his bed, and he was going to let her rest. It was only out of pure motives. The clever young man also noticed that in the ghost body there was something like a pea called the pure soul bead, which contained all of its life force, and it could not only store the ghost's power, but also particles of the sun and moon. In-soul beads are needed for the yang source contained in the demon body to be in one place, and in the center of the beads, the sun essence is very dense, which supports its immortality. A little embarrassed, the guy explained that they were indeed perfect for each other, like yin and yang. Even more angry, the ghost girl began to complain, saying that she was not going to stay here in the ordinary world with this strange guy. Unfortunately, Lady had no other place, so since the protagonist needed her, she might reluctantly stay with him. After listening to the ghost, the young man began to understand that she was dead and arrogant, and he no longer knew who he had found, a ghost helper or a mistress. However, Zhao Fan still had two unresolved issues that required immediate attention. The alarmed general began to beg the boy to help him, as he really wanted to be near his ghost girl. Watching this pair of lovers, the protagonist agreed, realizing that matters of the heart are not subject to rational choice. Taking out a strange pouch, he explained that their paths were different, and even if Su Yu stopped draining his yang, his soul would still leak out, and so Zhao Fan offered his homemade pills and asked the general to take them to preserve his life. In this way, they could be together again as a human and a ghost, but if Su Yu harmed anyone again, the protagonist would come again and end it. Radiating deep gratitude, the man and his beloved bowed before the young man and thanked him. The protagonist decided to take another ghost with him to talk to her later. Sometime later, the ghost girl put on earthly clothes and was very embarrassed, as these clothes made her feel ashamed. Suddenly, Lin Xiaoqiao saw a strange woman and didn't understand who she was. The future wife's scream echoed throughout the house, asking Zhao Fan who this woman was who was in their house. The girl was really very irritated and was even ready to kill her future groom to force him to answer a question. Smiling at his future wife, the guy told her that he had been to the old director today to exorcise a ghost that turned out to be this girl, but he had reassured her by saying that she would simply be their servant and not to worry. The ghost girl did not like this proposal and began to reproach the guy for using her only for cleaning the house, because she considered herself a princess. All this time, the guy understood that no matter how strong he was still afraid of women. The following events unfolded 3 days after the incident in the house. At the auction of the master's collection, everyone was greeted by an elderly man, and the treasures put up for auction were absolutely unique, and everyone could purchase a piece of art. Among these treasures was a jade pendant with a 1,000-year history, which contained many secrets, and it not only protected against demons, but also prolonged life. The young man who was present at the auction thought that after acquiring Lu's store, Wanfu seemed like a good idea to earn some money from the auction, but Lin Xiaoqiao clarified that her future husband himself had asked her father to spread the news of this auction, and she noticed that the results were really impressive since many influential people had gathered here. Although these people were not distinguished by anything special, they still made an impression with their influence. Nearby stood two martial artists who, at first glance, did not seem particularly outstanding. The masters immediately began to discuss that Zhao Fan had a weapon called Bing Pei, and it was truly a unique, magical weapon that could help him improve himself, control his mind and soul, and with it, he could probably reach the level of the innate essence. Martial arts have existed in their world since the beginning of its existence, and everyone must train as much as possible. And although 90% of fighters fail the 3 trials due to limited talent, it is possible to achieve the innate essence, and yet not everyone is worthy of it. The young man laughed and remarked that if this amulet was really so useful, then they should find a way to acquire more of them for their family. After a few minutes, the main character became bored and decided to leave this place. It turned out that it was Zhao Fan was being watched by someone through a telescopic sight. A hidden sniper watched the young man from the rooftop, and no one even noticed his presence. Without hesitation, the sniper fired a shot to hit Zhao Fan and eliminate him. Luckily, the guy dodged in time, deflecting the shot from his target. For the sniper, this was a startling phenomenon, and he realized that his target really had a high level of luck. Continuing to observe the young man, the sniper noticed that he entered the store with 2 girls. The Golden Killer, known as Invincible, knew that this guy only had a few hours left to live before he was going to send him to a better world. Several hours later, the events continued on a dark street, where the main character was walking with 2 companions. The wily villain drew his blade and decided to make a sneak attack, hoping that his target would not notice him and would be eliminated. Despite all his efforts, the villain managed to strike, and the protagonist was defeated as the blade struck him in the head. The worried Lin Xiaoqiao didn't know what to do in this situation and only watched as her future fiancé died. The Golden Killer was able to capture the future bride, since weak girls could not resist such a strong opponent. Thus, the villain realized that the man was dead and the women were now under his control. Sometime later, events took place in the suburbs, in the private residence of Huang Zhenxin. Family under the leadership of Hai Zio discussed that they had hired the best hitman, namely the Golden One, and he had just reported that the problem had been solved and Ling Xiaoqiao would soon be in the hands of the family leader, which would lead to the takeover of the entire Huang family business. Suddenly, there were rustling sounds nearby, as if someone was approaching the house. And this was indeed so, for one of the servants remarked that the goods had probably already arrived. Both servants went outside to greet the invincible warrior who had fulfilled the order. The man immediately declared that he was indeed a golden killer and carried out the order. Suddenly, one of the men noticed that something was wrong with the golden killer's behavior. At first glance, this man looked very strange, which raised doubts as to whether he really was a hired killer. As they approached, the servants discovered that it was not the golden killer, but just a fake. The main character, who was standing nearby, explained that an ordinary killer could not do anything to him, since he created an illusion of 3 rag dolls, and the villain took the bait. Trembling with fear, the villains could not believe these words, as they did not understand how it was possible to kill such an experienced killer. The impudent leader of the family immediately ordered his servants to deal with those who dared to come into his house. And he ordered the girl who was nearby to be left with him, hoping that he would be able to do with her whatever he wanted. Suddenly, an ordinary girl at first glance was able to lift a stone with the power of thought, controlling it with the help of her magical abilities. The elderly man couldn't believe his eyes and couldn't even imagine that the girl in front of him was a martial artist. The magically controlled stone flew straight past the elderly man. Unfortunately, a stone flying at incredible speed hit one of the servants directly, causing him unbearable pain. The worried young man begged for mercy, seeing how strong his opponent was. The protagonist was not going to give up, as his opponent had given himself a death sentence. Hiring a killer and attacking his future wife made his decision inexorable. Because of this, the villain was destined to die. Looking at both villains, the ghost girl decided to figure out what to do with them. Zhao Fan, wiping his hands after a short fight, declared that these enemies could not be allowed to escape. In addition, there were 2 more uninvited guests nearby who also needed to be pacified. These people were at the fair and were trying to get the magical artifacts that were in the possession of the main character. The young man could not understand how this was possible, since he had left his future wife in the car so that she would not witness everything that was happening, and no one could have imagined that anyone else would be there. Coming closer, the scoundrel said that now Zhao Fan definitely knows their family, since he has Bing Pei in his hand, and if he guesses what power it gives him, then he might leave Ling Xiao alive, but if he guesses wrong, then he will have to say goodbye to his beloved. These conditions irritated the young man, and he apologized, but his opponents were already dead, and the dead cannot dictate the rules. This answer surprised the uninvited guest, who considered his opponent a daredevil, and his name was Xiao Zhu, the master of the Luan family, and his Bing Pei helped him cultivate and made it possible to penetrate the most inaccessible places. Today, he was going to use it. Preparing to attack, the villain began to quickly approach the hero and wave his hand. The brave guy continued to stand in place, and at the last moment dodged, avoiding the blow. Watching all this, the man thought that with the help of Bin Pei, Xiao Zhu had almost reached the innate essence, but the boy evaded his master's power, which was a testament to his strength. The elderly servant was not going to allow his master to die and shouted that he was coming to help. Now the 2 opponents were about to attack Zhao Fan, but he kept dodging and did not counterattack, and he wanted to gauge the strength of his opponents. The young man decided to use magical techniques and began to use his super abilities in practice. Using one of his strongest attacks, Zhao Fan easily struck down 2 opponents at once, causing them to experience unbearable pain. The first blow left the elderly man unable to continue the fight, and he lay near a broken tree. After realizing his own strength, the young man came to the conclusion that the Luan family was not as great as they seemed, as their opponents were quite weak. Without realizing what had happened, the old man began to deny the strength of the protagonist, because on the path of learning martial arts, he had never encountered anything like this. And after all, the strength of the enemy is a sign of a martial arts master. In fact, Zhao Fan's strength was not equal to that of the masters, and he did not create strength. He was strength because he was a heavenly master. Such a weak opponent was unworthy of life in this world, and Zhao Fan decided to put him out of his misery. After winning the battle, the boy realized that the Lin clan had been holding the beauties back for their own benefit and trying to threaten him, and they were not the best people, but today he, the heavenly master, had brought order to this world. Looking around, the guy saw 2 opponents nearby and began to think what to do with them. The elderly man held his relative in his arms and begged Zhao Fan to let them go, promising that they would not cause any more trouble. Zhao Fan was kind to them and let them go, since they had already received the punishment they deserved. Meanwhile, Lin Xiaoqiao began to come to her senses and saw her future groom standing in front of her. The caring young man held her in his arms and assured her that the danger had passed. A little embarrassed, the girl kissed her savior, grateful for his help. A lifeless old man lay nearby, and an unusual butterfly was approaching him. Meanwhile, events were unfolding in the Luan family's estate on the outskirts of the imperial capital. An unknown man meditated in a magical room, surrounded by candles, seeking to improve his skills. Suddenly, he realized that he had achieved his goal and had risen to the level of a master. He waited for his grandson Xiao Heir to return so that he could form the Luan family together with Chief Elder Taishan and Lao San. More stronger. As soon as the relatives were mentioned, the candles went out. The experienced master immediately felt that something was wrong with his relatives because the candles could not have gone out just like that. Feeling very indignant, the old man shouted that his relatives were supposed to go to Jiangbei and buy Banpei, but for some reason their fire of life had died out, and the master immediately realized that someone dared to kill his family members. At that very moment, a strange magical butterfly flew in, which meant that a message had been received. This shocked the old master, but he knew that in this way he could find out what had happened to his relatives. The unusual butterfly gradually began to transform into a certain image, from which one could read a message. It turned out that the image depicted Zhao Fan after his victory. So the man realized that Zhao Fan had decisively attacked his grandson, and since this old man had become a master, his condition had become stable, and he could now fight the young master. A few days later, Zhao Fan was invited to Su Chun Yu from one of the most respected families in Jiangbi. The Chun family comes to see their sick daughter. A young daughter named Chun Chun was a young lady of the Chun clan, the daughter of Su Chun Inya. Looking at the girl, the young man immediately began to measure her pulse to understand what had happened to her. Quietly, the protagonist continued to observe his patient, trying to unravel her true condition. The worried man turned to the master, hoping for help for his daughter, knowing that the old man had been practicing medicine for many years, but his efforts were unsuccessful. Suddenly, when the protagonist approached to examine the patient, he was stopped and ordered to remove his hands. It turned out that the person in front of him was the young master of the Qin family, who realized that his father was unable to help and doubted that Zhao Fan would be able to help in any way. The words of the youngest son angered the father of the family, and he ordered that the rudeness towards the guest be stopped. The protagonist also understood that it was not easy for the young master of a large family to combine martial arts training with his duties, but he seemed to be good, and yet his intentions were not suspicious, since he clearly came to help a sick person and not to make false claims. The young man did not believe the words and thought that the guest Zhao Fan, who called himself a doctor, was a liar who was incapable of helping his sister. Realizing that he would not be able to demonstrate his power otherwise, Zhao took action, displaying some of his abilities. Thus, he created a magical barrier that prevented the family's youngest son from interfering with the examination of the sick girl. Seeing this, the young man realized that the force he saw was invisible, but it stopped him like a wall. Looking at the boy, Zhao Fan explained that while the Celestial Master was saving people, others were just getting in the way, and if the junior wanted a quick death, he was free to continue. Realizing his helplessness, the youngest son of the family stopped arguing with the master and agreed with him. The protagonist began to use the dragon's fiery energy for further inspection. Now it was necessary to introduce yang energy to examine the girl's condition. After introducing the yang energy into the lady's body, the young man was amazed by the results of the examination. It was revealed that the girl was inhabited by the sinister spirit of a giant snake, capable of killing anyone who touched her. This meant that there was dark energy in the young lady's body, causing her serious illness. Relatives could not imagine that the family's eldest daughter was suffering from such a serious illness. The determined protagonist took something special out of his pocket. It turned out that these were the magic seals that Zhao Fan intended to use to defeat the demon on the spot. The magical seals began to affect the demonic snake, but it seemed like it didn't pay any attention to them. The sinister creature continued to stare persistently at the protagonist, not wanting to die and seeking to cause as much harm to people as possible. A few hours later, the family gathered to drink tea and discuss the problem that had arisen with the eldest daughter. The worried young man decided to find out from the master what disease had struck his younger sister and how the demonic snake had ended up in her body. In fact, the guy wanted to ask his youngest son if they were attracted to snakes as children and he wanted to understand if there were any cases where they provoked snakes. At first, the young man was surprised by this question, but then he remembered that once in his childhood their family went on a trip, and during this trip his sister stepped on a small snake, and it bit her, and he was furious and killed the snake. Realizing what had happened, the protagonist exclaimed that it was enough, and he killed the demonic snake, and in return, he placed a curse on Chun-Er to die in her prime. The young man panicked and begged the master to help his sister. It was known that one could only get rid of the curse by killing the demonic snake, and yet, judging from the giant spiritual snake that inhabited Chun-Er's body, it was possible that it had reached the level of the dragon realm, and its strength exceeded that of Zhao Fan. This meant that their family and the master were not that close, and the master had no reason to risk his life for them. However, Zhao Fan had no choice, and he knew that he didn't feel much desire to help, but now there was no other way out, and inside him there was still a burning desire to help, but his strength was insufficient. After drinking tea, the young man felt the unusual effect of a strange drink, as if it had ancient roots. And it was indeed so, and the servant explained that it was the Hong tea, Pao, which his father carefully preserved and served only to the most honored guests. The hero realized that this was true because this tea was rare and hard to find because it had high value for increasing strength, and thanks to this tea, the effectiveness of training would increase, which would help defeat the demonic snake. Fortunately, the owners of the house had a few more packages of this tea, which they immediately gave to the young man, and they promised to inform him when more tea appeared, and as soon as the boy's strength increased, he would be able to help his younger sister. Thus, an agreement was successfully made that Zhao Fan was to return to this house once he became stronger to help the girl. Sometime later, the protagonist returned home feeling absolutely exhausted. Jiang Bei approached him and expressed a desire to discuss something important. It turned out that the director introduced his follower named Quan Xiao, who wanted to ask the young man for help in solving one problem. The brutal-looking man began to explain that due to the master's high skills, Zhao Fan was obliged to help his daughter. The next day, events continued to unfold at Swan's estate. Xiao, there was a young girl lying in the bed, looking very strange, and her eyes were black, and she was lying lifeless. Even the main character was struck by the girl's appearance, and he could not immediately understand what had happened to her. However, Zhao Fan decided to approach the sick lady to find out her true condition. After the initial examination, the young man turned to the girl's father to find out if she had been poisoned by something. And this turned out to be true, and yesterday the servant and the girl went for a walk and picked some mushrooms, but did not have time to cook them, and the lady, being a naughty girl, ate one of the mushrooms at random. Zhao Fan suddenly remembered that they had encountered a grave mushroom in the forest, and he asked if the girl had encountered anything else. With trepidation in her voice, the servant said that while picking mushrooms, the girl stepped on an excavated coffin, but she was not sure if this had any significance. Having decided to take action, the protagonist gave the mushroom to the ghost girl and asked her to fly around the area to find out if there was an evil spirit on the outskirts of the city. To complete the task, the ghost girl immediately headed to the window to fly away. Possessing magical abilities, the lady easily rose into the air and headed off to complete the task. For ordinary people, this was a truly amazing sight because it was difficult for them to understand how this was even possible. The young man, slightly embarrassed, explained that they should not panic because for them it was a flight, and this was a normal thing. After sending the ghost girl on a mission, the young man and the sick girl's father began to wait. Sometime later, the ghost returned after completing the task and said that he found a necessary creature, and a sleepy ghost that was locked in a certain place, and yesterday, Mei Er accidentally stepped on his coffin, after which he decided to take revenge on her. The ghost that was found also said that he would remove the curse from her if they helped him return a pair of red agate tigers. The girl's father immediately understood what was going on and knew where these tigers were. The alarmed man took out his phone and exclaimed that he thought he had heard about these tigers before. Tomorrow evening, there will be an auction in the city, where among other goods there will be these tigers. Taking the phone from the man, the protagonist noticed that these tigers really looked impressive and thought that one of them would decorate his house. The guy decided to see what else was being sold at the auction because there were a lot of interesting things there. After a few minutes of searching, Zhao Fan finally found something he really liked from the products on offer. Starting to look at the ghost girl and smile, he assumed that this product was probably meant for her. This turn of events clearly did not please her, and she immediately asked the young man what he had in mind. Events continued to unfold in the afternoon, before the auction began. Looking around, the ghost girl was impressed that the restaurant had some good wine and snacks, and she wanted to know who it was all for. The cunning guy simply replied that it was all for one Buddhist monk. This monk turned out to be Shen Xiao, who, despite his monastic vows, loved alcohol and meat, and one day he and Zhao Fan encountered a common problem and became close friends. The main character was glad to see his old friend and was surprised that he was safe and sound. Seeing the ghost girl, the Buddhist monk was amazed, and Zhao Fan's brother was so strong that he was able to accept the lost heart, and he admired it, noticing that this girl had already reached the second stage, and she was just a little bit away from the third. Feeling proud of his actions, the guy noted that his friend had amazing powers of observation, but this time he came with a request. Seeing the snacks on the table, the monk immediately asked for them to be removed, and besides, it was obvious that he wanted something because every time such cases appeared on the table, a lot of snacks and alcohol. Irritated by this reaction, Zhao Fan asked his friend if he had learned the 10 Commandments of Buddhism, particularly the third one. But the monk no longer showed much interest in this, since he had spread his legs on the dining table and decided to have a good meal. He laughed and remarked that he could recite these commandments, but only on the condition that Zhao Fan treated him well. The next day, events continued at the auction, where there were many security guards. The ghost girl doubted the monk, but the young man consoled her, explaining that all this was for her sake, and if she could not obtain the 5 yen hearts, she would never reach the third level of strength. If the monk cannot extract the magical heart, then no one else will. Looking at the monk, the girl could not believe how powerful he was. Meanwhile, the auction began and people began to bid on various items. In the excitement of the moment, wealthy auction participants continued to buy up jewelry and high-priced goods. However, neither the main character nor the monk enjoyed it. They were just bored while sitting at the event. Deciding to break the monotony, the girl asked how much longer they would have to sit there and when they would start selling the red agate tigers. Yawning slightly, the young man replied that there was no point in worrying, since the real treasures usually appear at the end. The auction administrator announced that the most anticipated part of the evening was beginning. An auction worker came onto the stage carrying a treasure covered in gold paper. The first item was the world's only fire agate, a translucent stone that always emits fire and transmits heat when touched, and studies have shown its ability to destroy cancer cells. For the auction participants, it was a breathtaking treasure equivalent to a lifetime's worth, and they began to bid. The protagonist, watching what was happening, understood that for these mortals it was just an ordinary agate. In fact, the soul of the fire demon king lived in this stone. Raising his hand, Zhao Fan exclaimed, declaring that he was betting 1.5 billion. The people present at the auction were stunned by what was happening. They could not understand how an ordinary person could make such high bids, and such jokes could end in death. The young man began to justify himself, saying that those present should not judge him. He was not directed against anyone in particular. He just wanted to say that everyone present at the auction was nothing more than ordinary people. The self-confident guy asked to finish the procedure quickly so that he could buy the stone as soon as possible. There was also a bandit at the event because the hero asked Lin Xiaoqiao to find him, and he could hack the Swiss bank, and he already had 5.6 billion yuan. In addition, Quan Xiao gave him money, and the Heavenly Master already had nearly 7 billion yuan. Fire agate may extend life, but it is not as good as a mortal's body armor, and no one would buy such a thing at that price. Only one of the men present raised the bid to 1.6 billion yuan. With 7 billion yuan in the protagonist's account, this was not a problem, and he saw that his opponent had only raised his bet by 100 million, which was too little, so he bet 2.6 billion yuan. This greatly angered his opponent. Wu Lao Zi was diagnosed with cancer and nothing could save him, but perhaps fire agate could help, and in any case, it had to be obtained. Filled with rage, the man shouted, raising the bet to 2.8 billion yuan, realizing that he had reached his limit. Seeing his opponent trying to do something, the young man only laughed and was surprised that this was the limit of his enemy. Without hesitation, Zhao Fan raised the bid to 3.8 billion yuan. The auction administrator announced that the final bid was 3.8 billion yuan and began the countdown. After the countdown was completed, it was announced that agate had sold for 3.8 billion yuan. This outcome was unacceptable to the man, and he could not believe that a villager could be so rich, and this meant that Lao Zi will not only take his money and the jewel, but possibly his life as well. After winning the competition, the protagonist discussed with his friend that money is just a tool, and the life of the Demon King is the only treasure in the world, and he soon planned to ask the Shinshio brothers to recite a mantra for them to help the ghost girl absorb all the demonic power. Suddenly, the girl noticed that several people were watching them nearby. Realizing that this was a common thing, the young man only remarked that he, a noble heavenly master, had to deal with such mortals from morning to night, which was truly annoying. Suddenly, an armored vehicle appeared nearby, shouting from within, demanding that Zhao Fan voluntarily hand over the fire agate. It turned out it was Lao Zi, who lost at the auction, but now he was trying to seize the fire agate, holding a gun in his hands. This was no problem for the young man, and he asked the ghost girl to deal with these scoundrels. Using her magical abilities, the girl easily moved towards her enemies to strike from behind. With a few blows, all the enemies were defeated and lay on the ground unconscious. When a man saw this fight, he was amazed and could not believe his eyes. Zhao Fan began to be indignant because he wanted the ghost girl to simply punish the villains and could not understand why she killed them. The girl explained her actions by the fact that evil is present in every person and death eradicates this evil. These words made the scoundrel tremble with fear, and he began to sweat heavily from nervous tension. Having decided to repent for his actions, the man knelt before his older brother and wanted to ask for forgiveness. However, the main character decided to let the villain go, realizing that he was terminally ill and had only a couple of days left to live. Suddenly, someone nearby started shouting, and Zhao Fan decided to turn around to see what was going on. On the floor lay the lifeless body of a sick man, and in front of him stood a powerful magician who destroyed the villain. It turned out to be Feng Qingcheng, who killed the villain simply because she wanted to. The ghost girl immediately assumed that there was an enemy in front of her and wanted to attack him. The young man instantly stopped his partner and realized that the girl had such high skills that she had very little left to reach the realm of the master. This is why she was sometimes called the half-step master, as she was a member of the Wind family, one of the 4 great families of martial arts. At the auction, Zhao Fan sensed Feng's presence. Qing Chang thought that she was now like an unlucky ghost chasing him to get the fire agate. Initially, this was the case, but the girl had already realized that her opponent had reached a high level and she was not going to cause him any trouble because Zhao Fan was stronger. The smart guy was glad to meet him and realized that his opponent's level was quite high, and within a year, she would be able to compete with many masters, and it was easier for a talented person to achieve success, and therefore Feng needed to continue studying in order to fight stronger opponents. The girl simply thanked him for his noble deed, realizing that she could not resist Zhao Fan. Thus, the problems were solved, and now it was necessary to return home as soon as possible to help the ghost girl increase her power. After some time, events unfolded in Lin Xiaoqiao's house, and the monk and the ghost began to meditate to absorb the demon stone. Lin Xiaoqiao was curious about this unusual guest and wanted to know what the bald man was doing in their house, and the protagonist explained that it was his friend Shinshio who was reciting mantras and helping the ghost. With the help of the Buddha's mantra, Shinshio began to use the ancient powers to absorb the energy of the demon stone. This proved effective, and the fire demon began to show its true power, trying to break out. The strong monk began to suppress the demon's aggression and restrain its power to prevent it from escaping. Meanwhile, the ghost girl used an ability called Right Life Demonic King Purification. This effective ritual allowed the energy of the fire demon to be absorbed for good. Enraged, the demon king used his magical powers directly against the monk. Realizing that he could no longer resist, the Buddhist monk noted that the demon king's attack was too powerful to contain. Due to this development, Zhao Fan decided to intervene and use his magical abilities to stop the demon king. With his powerful abilities, the protagonist used the dragon's energy to transfer it to the monk. The dragon's energy and Buddha's magic combined, and the call of the forces of good was successful, suppressing the demon. Thanks to the forces of good, the Fire King began to gradually lose his strength and could no longer resist. Now the ghost girl had a chance to absorb all the energy of the demon king and improve her magical abilities. After absorbing the king's demonic energy, only his death roar followed, signifying his death. With the help of a magical ritual, the ghost girl became much stronger and felt a surge of energy in her body. The monk himself was exhausted and felt that he needed a lot of strength to recover. With a heavy sigh, the hero admitted that they had dealt with it quite quickly, even though the Demon King was a top-class opponent. Unfortunately, the ghost girl did not reach the 3rd level of her power, but the energy she received was enormous, like a limit only a ghost could reach. The prospect of such a turn of events pleased the young man, although he realized that he would have to take certain steps to strengthen the ghost girl's power. At this time, the future wife turned to Zhao Fan, informing him that a package from Li Sanjiao had arrived during the day. Together with his future wife, they decided to explore what their grandfather had brought. A few minutes later, they examined the package, and the contents of the box amazed the protagonist. There was a high-grade spiritual stone inside, and the grandfather was overly kind, knowing that the young man would soon have to face a monster, and handed him the stone that he had kept for most of his life. This item, which possessed the pure spiritual energy of heaven and earth without any impurities, belonged to the highest class. Lin Xiaoqiao looked at her future husband and didn't understand anything, but the stone looked amazing. Turning to his beloved, the young man exclaimed that he wanted to immediately begin absorbing spiritual energy and that she would have to sleep alone today. This statement greatly surprised Lin Xiaoqiao, and she couldn't believe that they could actually sleep together. However, these words angered the girl, and she literally began throwing pillows at the young man, screaming that she did not intend to sleep with him. After several hours, night fell, and the protagonist began to prepare for the magical ritual. Thanks to the runes, Zhao Fan was able to begin absorbing the magic crystal to increase his vitality and strength. The absorption of the crystal was marked by the fact that the guy's entire body was covered in magical energy. After absorbing the stone, the chances of defeating the demonic serpent were 10%. The next morning, Zhao Fan prepared to head to Shenangjia with his team, where the demonic snake lived. The next morning, events took place in a mansion where a sick girl was located, under the influence of the spirit of a demonic snake. The whole team was ready, and the main character was ready to fight the most powerful opponent in his life. The girl's brother was surprised. Master Zhao Fan told him that he needed to prepare to fight the demon snake, and a few days ago he doubted his strength, but now he dared to think that his strength had increased. Zhao Fan only replied that the celestial master was in control of everything, and he had no intention of dying here, and he had nothing to worry about. In a few days, he would return his healthy sister to him. These words calmed the young man, and he happily handed over his sister for the ritual. The guy looked at the car and noticed that it only had room for 4 people, and he didn't know where to sit. The insightful protagonist suggested that there was a special place in the car for his little brother. This place was quite unusual. The guy had to sit right on the roof and ride like that the whole way. After a long journey, events continued in Shenangjia. After a tiring journey, the main character was very tired, his back hurt, and he asked his younger brother to look for a house where he could spend the night. Approaching one of the houses, the guy noticed that he could spend the night there, since it was the closest. The Buddhist monk was confused by this house and thought that something was wrong. Stopping his companions, the monk said that this house had a big red door, as well as 3 wells nearby. According to Feng Shui, this is one of the 5 most unfavorable signs, so it is better not to go to this house. The 3 wells and the big red door create negative energy in the yard, and those who live here for a short time usually find nothing good. But over time, the sinister energy accumulated, becoming more and more powerful, and eventually, at night, when everyone gathered together, the castle with the 3 wells would be locked, and under the influence of evil spirits, those inside were doomed to die. Confronted by this, they could not remain indifferent, and Zhao Fan asked his comrade to recite a mantra to summon the dead spirits and find out the circumstances. The most powerful monk began to use his skills to summon the spirits of the departed. It turned out that a family lived in this house together with evil spirits that destroyed them, but the monk was unable to call only one of them. He was only able to appeal to 4 tormented spirits. It is unknown whether they retain memories of the past. After asking his comrade to take a rest, Zhao Fan set to work, intending to talk to the spirits. At first, he was going to charge these souls with dragon energy, hoping that it would help them remember something. The spirits immediately began to be saturated with the dragon's magic, but they reacted to it strangely. It turned out that only one soul retained its memory, and the rest had already lost their minds due to the influence, and they needed help to return to themselves. To free the souls of the ghosts, it was necessary to repeat the ritual, and the monk set about this task. One of the souls still remembered the past and was able to tell what happened. Seeing this, the hero immediately began to ask the girl what really happened. The fearful ghost girl was called Yin Air, and she could not remember how she died, for their souls constantly wander, as if in the mouth of a beast, slowly losing their consciousness. It suddenly became clear that they were being followed, and someone disappeared behind the bushes. Upon discovering this, the ghost girl immediately took action and approached the observer. It turned out to be a man who looked suspicious. The summoned spirit immediately said that it was Brother Shun. They lived in the same village and grew up together, and although he could not speak and was a little sick, he was a very good person. For the protagonist, this was great news, and he asked the man to answer questions about whether he had noticed anything strange in recent days. To this question, the man began to answer indistinctly, making strange sounds. For the monk and his companion, this was a completely incomprehensible speech that was impossible to decipher. Luckily, the spirit knew how to understand the speech of this strange guy, and told him that Brother Shun saw a man in a cloak come to their house and lock it, after which he headed towards the well. Hearing this, the young man immediately realized that he needed to act urgently and asked the man to show him the way. The alarmed man began to utter incomprehensible cries, pointing towards the well. Summoning his magic weapon, Zhao Fan felt that the situation required immediate action and a thorough investigation of the situation. Looking down into the well, Zhao Fan was shocked to see what was inside. It turned out that something called a lunar corpse lived in the well. In the records of the Celestial Master, it was described that the lunar corpse is the body of a deceased person who has gone through a special rite, and its head is separated from the body and thrown into the water, and the body is buried next to a well, and the head absorbs the essence of the moon, transforming itself. The moon corpse begins to gain strength from the 7th new moon to the full moon, feeding on the rays of the moon, and it is not a zombie, as it has a beating heart and a pulse, and it steadily gains strength. The comrade immediately decided that it was necessary to break all the coins hanging on the walls of the well in order to bring the head of the lunar corpse to life. This was not difficult for the main character, and he immediately began to destroy all the coins. A Buddhist monk also used his magical powers to contact the lunar being. The magic beads were pointed straight towards the well where the strange creature lived. Immediately after this, the bald monk began calling upon the merciful Amitabha to come and help in this difficult test. A seal appeared around the magic beads, which allowed the entire surrounding area to be purified. Under the influence of the protagonist's magical abilities, all the magic coins were instantly irradiated with magic. With supernatural power, Zhao Fan was able to lift many coins into the sky and remove them from the well. The coins flew through the air, and the young man followed them to complete the ritual. Using the energy of the dragon, a secret ritual of the Celestial Master clan was performed. With the help of his supernatural power, the guy easily managed to destroy all the coins that were in the air. The Buddhist comrade immediately noticed that the demonic creature had crawled out to see what had happened to his jewels. To expel the demon of the lunar energy yang, an appeal to the merciful Buddha was used. Coming closer, the girl's spirit immediately noticed in what form the evil spirit was hiding. It turned out that it was Shun's brother, who had previously approached the team to show them that very well. The man's spirit watched the scene with disbelief, not believing that it had actually happened. The experienced protagonist immediately got to the heart of the problem and began to act. Touching the man's body, he summoned from there a true spirit, devoid of demonic power. After summoning the true spirit, the man's body began to decompose as if it was made of clay. In fact, Li Shun saw an unknown person hanging a lock on the door of the Tian family, after which he was killed and became a moon corpse. This body, made of clay, was a copy, and the real body was hidden near the well. This fact deeply upset the man because he realized that he was actually dead. After realizing his death, Li Shun's soul dissolved, finding peace in a better world. The young man continued to console the man, assuring him that there was no point in torturing himself, because the next life would definitely be happy. The next morning, the Buddhist monk continued his rituals, cleansing the area of evil spirits with the power of Buddha. This cleared many square meters of the surrounding area, giving people the opportunity to return and continue living here. The barrier was destroyed, and everyone present in the settlement could continue their lives. The monk also thought that he had already returned the Buddhist beads to Tian. Yin released their souls along with Li Shun's soul, allowing them to return to the village and find the culprit. However, they had to move on to find the demonic snake and save the innocent girl. Sometime later, events took place in the forest, where the team continued on their way. Suddenly, someone nearby screamed for help, and the main character immediately responded. The brave guy instantly came to the aid of the man who asked for help. It turned out that the people were screaming because of the Black Panther, who was preparing to attack. The restless travelers found themselves in a difficult situation, and the brave guy tirelessly tried to protect his girlfriend. The panther could not stand it and rushed into the attack, full of rage towards the people. Fortunately, someone managed to prevent the wild animal from attacking. Seeing this, the travelers were shocked, not knowing who was able to stop the panther. Coming closer to the travelers, the main character asked if they were all right. Everyone turned out to be okay, and the stranger was surprised to see that the hero had destroyed the leopard with just one stone. His girlfriend explained that they came there to paint the beauty of nature, but were suddenly attacked by a panther. For the guy, saving people was a natural reaction, and he didn't ask for any reward. A little embarrassed, the lady introduced herself as Han. Xiao Yu and her boyfriend Zhou Chun, they both live in Huzhou. As a token of gratitude, the girl handed over a jade pendant that had been passed down in her family from generation to generation, and she had never been interested in its value, but decided to give it away as a token of gratitude. Seeing the pendant, the main character remembered who it belonged to previously. Laughing, the protagonist asked if the girl had an ancestor named Han Pajun. After apologizing, Lady explained that their family tree was destroyed during the Cultural Revolution, and she knew nothing about such an ancestor. Zhao Fan decided to give his phone number to the girl and asked her to ask her elders if there was a person with that name in their family tree. They then said goodbye, and the couple was very grateful to their savior for saving their lives. The protagonist's friend asked him what he saw when the girl gave him a pendant that seemed like some kind of treasure. It turned out that it was a Jialan stone, which has unusual properties. The monk had questions about what this stone actually does. The main character didn't have enough time to explain, so he decided to demonstrate how valuable this magic stone was. The clever Buddhist monk remembered that they had found these stones yesterday when they were extracting Li Shun's soul. These stones were stones of immortality, in which the soul dwelt, capable of reviving the body and starting life anew, without aging and living forever. This is the true heavenly destiny. There was free space inside the stone where items could be stored. Considering that Han Xiaoyu had a family heirloom, her ancestor might have been acquainted with her future heir, so he asked her to go back and ask her relatives if it was possible for them to meet in the future. The team decided to end the conversation, as the demonic creature was still at large and needed to be destroyed as soon as possible. Sometime later, the team reached a strange cave that aroused suspicion. The cave turned out to be a natural pond. Its coldness made one shiver, probably a special place for cultivation, where the snakes settled and absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to become stronger. For the sick girl's older brother, it didn't matter who the monster was, the main thing was to kill it. Zhao Fan stopped the boy, reminding him that he had to protect his younger sister. The rest took on the responsibility of finding and destroying the snake, as they were stronger than the average guy. After a few minutes, they began to explore the pond to find out its nature. Inside the reservoir, everything looked different, and there was even a small lake nearby. The surrounding land was fertile, thanks to which the forces could increase significantly. As they approached the lake, they saw the shadow of a strange creature that resembled a snake. A giant snake emerged from the lake, ready to attack. For the young man, this was surprising, because even for the most powerful demonic creatures, this snake was lucky. The snake paid no attention to the people and immediately attacked, opening its mouth and heading toward his target. His powerful attack resulted in an explosion that would have been fatal to a normal human. The main character managed to use the golden bell to protect his comrades. A Buddhist monk also took part in the defense, ensuring victory in the battle. Using his magical powers, the monk easily created a magical shield that protected his allies and prevented them from dying in battle. Immediately after casting a protective shield spell on the protagonist and the ghost girl, they immediately began to attack. The huge snake was prepared for this attack and immediately responded, using its gigantic body to counterattack. Under the force of the blow, the attackers were thrown back several dozen meters and crashed into the rocks. Fighting against such a powerful opponent was difficult even for a powerful mage like Zhao Fan. Even the ghostly girl was in great difficulty, despite her newly acquired power that even the gods could envy. The powerful enemy used the Ice Snake Spear skill and attacked the youth's team. Thanks to their agility, the girl and the main character were able to dodge and continue the battle. Using his magical abilities, the protagonist remembered the secret notes of Tian Shi, which said that in order to defeat the dragon, it is necessary to attack him in the eyes, and this is his weak point. All other blows are useless. The Snake King was on the verge of transforming into a dragon and the team had to stop him. So Zhao Fan ordered the ghost girl to attack the enemy's horns. Earth magic proved to be very useful in battle, so the girl began to manipulate the stones, lifting them and directing them at the snake. The stones began to entwine the snake's body, preventing it from moving freely. Coming closer, the girl launched another attack, but the snake freed itself from its shackles using its magic. Using his magical horn, the demonic serpent responded by striking down the ghostly girl. From the force of the blow, the magical girl's soul began to disappear like an illusion as it gradually evaporated. It turned out that this was just an illusion, and the ghostly girl ordered the snake to not be so overconfident about the battle. After the next attack, it became clear that the snake was not harmed, even after the girl's strongest blow. Each attack only irritated the demonic serpent, and it became more and more aggressive, confronting several opponents at once. During the battle, the ghost girl realized that she could not defeat the Snake King with the power of her second peak. The Buddhist monk also joined the fight and used his powerful ability, Giant Buddha Palm. This palm could not only attack, but also protect allies, so the monk tried to help the team win. Thanks to her ally, the ghost girl activated her magical abilities to the fullest extent, using the ghost demon's hidden technique. The hidden technique proved effective against a serious opponent, causing severe pain to the snake even. An ordinary guy watching what was happening thought that he was witnessing a battle of gods. Using a magic brush, the protagonist summoned the dragon and announced the beginning of its attack. This time, Zhao Fan used the technique of summoning the Eastern god in the form of a black dragon and the Western god in the form of a white tiger. After summoning powerful creatures, the young man ordered them to attack immediately. The divine beings immediately entered the battle, seeking to confront and harm the demonic being. With the help of two deities, they managed to break the horns of the evil demon, depriving him of the ability to continue the fight. Trembling with fear, the demon showed his weakness, begging to stop beating him. It took 3 people with supernatural powers to defeat this enemy. Now it was necessary to overthrow Chun Air on the ground, and douse her with snake venom to break the spell. Under the influence of snake venom, the girl began to emit magical dark aura. After the battle, they managed not only to heal the girl, but also to expel the evil demon spirit from her body. Thanks to the actions of the protagonist and his team, the snake curse was destroyed. Excited with joy, the young man noted the successful outcome of the battle and the rescue of his sister. Touching his former enemy, the protagonist declared his intention to extract the internal elixir and the demon soul from his body as valuable resources. The mission was successfully completed, and the team only had to return home. Suddenly, something started moving in the water, implying the presence of another enemy. The monk noticed the unusual movement and warned his comrade. A huge wall of water rushed towards the unconscious girl, foreshadowing a new threat. Some creature grabbed the girl and began to lift her into the air. Zhao Fan, not understanding what was going on, tried his best to save the young lady, instantly returning to her on help. Although the brave warrior managed to grab the girl by the hand and prevent her from falling into the water. But as soon as he tried to save her, a huge column of water rose from the water, blocking the view of what was happening to his sick sister. At this time, the hero was already directly under the water, trying to save the girl by any possible means. While trying to pull the girl out of the water, he wondered what had happened. All this time, the girl was gradually drowning, not even trying to get to the surface. After some time, the young man came to his senses and discovered that he was lying on some surface. Looking around, he saw an underwater palace where he could breathe freely. However, he had no idea where Chun was. Chun, she must have been somewhere nearby. Suddenly, Zhao Fan began to hear strange sounds and couldn't understand what was happening in this place. A strange jug of enormous size jumped out of the water. The jug contained flowers, on one of which lay Chun Air. Seeing this, the young man immediately realized that the spiritual power of the entire palace was concentrated in one place. Perhaps Chun is destined to be the guardian of this place. The flower itself created an unusual magical shell in which the girl was located. It seemed that she was still unconscious. Soon after, Chun began to levitate, still remaining in a dream state. The vase that appeared from under the ground began to slowly shrink, which was not a very good sign. The girl fell to the floor, gradually sinking under the water. She still had not come to her senses. Realizing that the girl needed to be saved, Zhao Fan picked her up and began to examine her body to see what was wrong. To fully understand what had happened, the protagonist decided to touch the girl's forehead. He felt something during the touch that he had never experienced before. The mortal man sucked in the cold lake energy that was at the alchemy stage, and it was a cold spirit that was opposite to Zhao Fanyu. The young man couldn't even imagine how she had managed to reach this level, and many people couldn't achieve this in their entire lives, and it seemed that Chun Chun is destined to become the chosen one of heaven. Suddenly the girl opened her eyes, finally coming to her senses. As soon as Chun came to her senses, she called Zhao Fan her father. It was a real shock for the guy, and he didn't understand why they called him that. The joyful girl threw herself into her father's arms, and the young man realized that she had probably lost her memory after what had happened. The little girl hugged her so-called father so tightly that she almost suffocated him. This brought a smile to the girl's face, and she felt embarrassed by her actions. It was difficult for the protagonist. The joy of saving the girl was mixed with confusion from the fact that she called him her father. Sometime later, the boy and girl reached the shore and returned to dry land. The monk and the ghost girl were glad that Zhao Fan had returned to the surface. The older brother was also glad that his little sister had come to her senses and could now live as before. All this caused stress for the girl, and she did not know how to behave. But when her older brother came to hug her, she screamed that he was bad and hit him. The young man could not understand his sister's reaction and wanted to figure it out, because he was her brother and a fighter, and yet where did she get such strength to strike such a blow? Zhao Fan tried to explain what happened at the bottom of the lake, and said that her memory was probably damaged and confused, which is why she called him her father. She has an ice crystal stone in her body, but she can't use her spiritual power yet, even though her fighting skills are stronger than the master. The young man could hardly believe his sister, and he could not reach such heights in his entire life, but she was able to do it when she was sleeping. The monk just smiled and said that fate had a great sense of humor. Either way, the team needed to go back and find a way to help their little sister regain her memory. Suddenly, the girl stopped the main character and asked him to wait. Soon after, she decided to use her magic jug to perform an unusual trick. The jug gradually increased in size, and it was a liquid that needed to be poured out. Using magic, she decided to pour all the water from the jug directly into the lake. Once the procedure was completed, the jug instantly shrank and could be taken with you. The happy little sister only said that it would be better for the whole team, and she was ready to leave this place. For the protagonist, this was really impressive, and the monk understood that there was a very rare treasure in this girl's body. The elder brother was proud of his little sister and believed that their Chun family would become the strongest in the future. After returning from Shenangjia, Zhao Fan spent the whole day alone, and after observing Chin Chun, he sent her home, intending to help her regain her memory. Upon returning home, the heroes felt tired and decided to use the meat of the demonic snake to restore and strengthen their bodies. Suddenly, the old man turned to the master and introduced him to a little girl. The main character asked Old Man Lao Fu with interest where he got such a cute child. It turned out that she was his granddaughter named Yao Yao, and he asked Zhao Fan to take the girl to school since he had urgent business and could not see her off. It wasn't a problem for the guy, but this girl seemed really special to him. After looking at the girl, the guy managed to find out that Yao Yao could not speak until she was 5 years old, and after that she began to speak, but once every 2 months she would have a fever, and after 2 to 3 days she would recover. The old man admitted that this was indeed so, and said that their master was very insightful. Even the monk noticed that the girl possessed a rare treasure of a cold jade body, and when her inner spirit was activated, she would be able to absorb the spirit of heaven and earth, as well as breath. No matter what skills this girl has, she is still the top of the universe. Having assessed the girl's skills, the Buddhist monk invited her to join their sect and consider him her teacher. For a little girl, this was a rather boring occupation because she believed that she was never going to become a nun. Addressing the girl, the protagonist explained that he was only a descendant of his ancestors and did not have the qualifications to accept disciples, and he did not require her to take an oath of apprenticeship, but wanted to be her brother. After hearing this, the girl immediately thought that her brother would protect her if someone offended her, and would definitely come to her aid. This was no problem for the protagonist, and he assured that no one would dare to offend Yao Yao, as he would be the first to come to his aid. This made the little girl very happy, and she immediately ran to hug her older brother. The old man even began to cry from such a touching moment, because he could not believe that his granddaughter called Master Zhao Fan her teacher, and their family quickly became close thanks to kindness. All this meant was that Yao Yao asked Zhao Fan to remain her elder brother today. The elderly man chuckled and immediately left the room, closing the door behind him, leaving the young man feeling deceived. Some time later, events took place at Safflower Elementary School. The main character, who is a heavenly master, had to take children to elementary school, which seemed like too small a task to him. However, looking at this place, the guy immediately realized that something was wrong here. The school seemed strange, as if there was a dark energy hovering around it. The dark energy was too strong, and it seemed like someone had set up an ominous barrier to force Yao Yao to return to Earth and form a deadly cycle. There were other oddities too, and there were no other plants in the school except these red flowers, which looked unusual. Moreover, all the children in this school seemed sick, as if infected with evil. Understanding that Yao Yao was born with a rare spirit and body, Zhao Fan knew that it would not affect her, and yet they should not enter this school, and so he decided to pick a flower to study it thoroughly. Sometime later, the main character and his friend found themselves not far from home. An inventive guy decided to plant a flower near his house to see how it affects the environment. As soon as the flower was planted, all the plants nearby instantly began to wither, as if they had died. Seeing this, Zhao Fan couldn't understand what happened and why it happened. This flower represented a danger that absorbed life energy. The boy realized that this type of flower is capable of absorbing not only the nutrients of other plants, but also the essence of children, overcoming the barrier around school. Some villains decided to use the flowers of their homeland for their own evil purposes, and this evening the protagonist and his team were going to go and catch the culprits. Several hours later, the events unfolded late in the evening, not far from the school. The entire squad was ready, hiding on one of the roofs of a multi-story building. Peeking out from her hiding place, the ghost girl noticed a man approaching. It turned out that it was the school principal walking by, carrying a bag with unknown contents. At first glance, it seemed like a betrayal, both to set up a barrier in the school and plant flowers that would absorb the essence of his own students. The director believed that his idea was brilliant, and in a short time, the ancestors of the Yang family would be able to strengthen their supernatural powers and seize power in China. After the director took care of the flowers, he immediately left the place. Seeing this, the guy decided to stop his friend and explain that there was no point in pursuing the director, and if the Yang family really did have a martial arts master, then even the three of them wouldn't be able to defeat him. That was why Zhao Fan ordered the ghost girl to keep an eye on the director from afar, not getting too close to avoid danger. Following her commander's orders, the girl began to follow the director unnoticed. First, the monk and Zhao needed to get rid of these ominous flowers so that they would no longer threaten the students' life energy.